Good evening. Thanks for joining us at Awaz News. I'm Kubrali and I'll be taking you through big news across Canada.
Images released of vehicles, suspects involved in alleged $300,000 copper wire theft, Toronto Police. Canada's highest court releases decision on Ontario cabinet letter sides with Premier Duckford. Ontario crypto king associate sentenced to jail. Man arrested after firearm discharged into adjoining home, police say. New details released after vehicle stolen with young children inside. Feds to give Toronto another $143 million to help house asylum seekers. Man charged in 2010 murder after flying into Toronto Pearson Airport.
Those were the headlines, and now let's look into the details.
Two teenage boys, ages 13 and 16, are facing a slew of charges after police say they stole a vehicle with two young children inside the northwest end of the city on Thursday. According to police, at around 3:30 p.m., a driver briefly exited their running vehicle with their two children, ages 4 and 7 months, inside. At that point, a 13-year-old jumped into the vehicle, drove away, and picked up a second suspect a short distance away, police said. Officers were immediately dispatched to the area and located the vehicle, which had been abandoned after the two teens attempted to take off on foot, investigators said. After a brief foot chase, the two suspects were arrested, police confirmed. One of the victims' children suffered minor injuries, investigators said, and was transported to hospital where they were treated and released. The two teens, who cannot be identified under the provisions of the Youth Criminal Justice Act, are facing several charges including theft of a motor vehicle, abducting a person under 16, and possession of property obtained by crime. A man wanted in connection with a murder that took place over a decade ago has been taken into custody after flying into Pearson International Airport. The incident took place June 25, 2010 at an apartment building on Ritson Road North in Oshawa. According to Durham police, officers were called to the scene for reports of disturbance. When they arrived, they found two men with serious injuries and rushed them to the hospital. One victim, identified as 32-year-old Derek Brooks, was later pronounced dead. At the time, police said they did not believe the murder was a random act. However, few details have been publicly released. A man was charged with second-degree murder and attempted murder in 2011. At the time, two other suspects were being sought. Durham police said three other individuals were arrested and charged in connection with this homicide: a 38-year-old man from Port Hope, a 39-year-old man from Oshawa, and 40-year-old woman from Carrington. Their identities were not disclosed. On Friday, about 13 years later after the homicide, police said they have made an arrest. The suspect was taken into custody after flying into Toronto from South America. Police were notified by the Canada Border Services Agency and transported them back to Durham region. The suspect, identified as 36-year-old Santos Pukasangur, is facing second-degree murder and robbery charges. He has been held for a bail hearing. It's unclear how long Pukasangur was in South America or why he returned to Canada. The charges have not been proven in court. Canada's top court has agreed with Ontario government that Premier Duckford's mandate letters to cabinet are exempt from freedom of information laws. The Supreme Court of Canada judgment, which was heard by a 7-person panel in April, was released Friday morning. The court concluded the mandate letters did reflect the view of the Premier on the importance of certain policy priorities and marked the initiation of a fluid process of policy formulation within Cabinet. In the ruling, Justice Andrew McKee Karakatsanis pointed out that the Premier and Cabinet have the prerogative to determine when and how to announce its decisions. Cabinet confidentiality both enables the proper functioning of responsible government by promoting collective ministerial accountability to the legislature and affords the executive the operational space it needs to function effectively, she wrote. This case began 6 years ago when CBC made a Freedom of Information request for the 23 mandate letters Premier Duckworth gave to his cabinet ministers after first being elected in 2018. A mandate letter is typically a generic document that outlines the responsibilities of a minister as well as the Premier's priorities for the file. The government denied the CBC's request, citing cabinet exemptions, specifically Section 12 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. They argued that releasing the letters publicly would reveal the substance of deliberations of the Premier and his cabinet. The media outlet appealed to the Ontario Information and Privacy Commissioner (IPC), who ordered the release of the letters. The government appealed his decision at 2 other provincial courts only to have their applications dismissed. The Supreme Court of Canada is the only court to side with the Ford government and allow their appeal of the Commissioner's decision to stand. The IPC's view, while intelligible and transparent, was too narrow, the court found. Scott Reed, CTV News political commentator, stressed that cabinet privilege has real importance and allows for true discussion and debate among government officials. However, he argued that mandate letters are typically more generic and are not secretive. While legally the Premier does not have to reveal his instructions to cabinet, Reid argues it's not a great look for Ford. The Ontario New Democratic Party argued the people of Ontario deserve to know what the Premier instructed his cabinet ministers to do. At a news conference, leader Marit Stiles told reporters the government has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and hours fighting to keep these letters a secret. In a statement, the Ontario Liberal Party agreed with the notion that the public deserves to know what the Premier instructs his ministers to do. The Ontario Green Party, meanwhile, said it sets a poor precedent for democracy in Ontario. The people of Ontario are entitled to transparency and accountability from their elected officials, leader Mike Schreiner said. The Ontario NDP has not yet released a statement following the decision. An associate of Ontario's so-called crypto king has been sentenced to 5 months in jail after refusing to surrender an iPhone to investigators and destroying data, a judge said. Colin Murphy, 27, was taken into police custody on Friday, with his official sentencing set to start at the Lindsay, Ontario prison on February 8, after he was declared in contempt of court. He was previously ordered to repay $120,000 to investor Craig Sutherland and turn in his Porsche Ford pickup truck and gold-plated firearms to the court following a ruling in November. Murphy represented himself in court, appearing in light-washed jeans and an army green hoodie on Friday. This is the first criminal charge laid in connection with 25-year-old Aidan Petersky's alleged Ponzi scheme. Sutherland launched a civil suit against Murphy in December 2022, but the case veered into criminal jurisdiction after Murphy hid and withheld evidence from court officers who showed up at his girlfriend's home with an injunction to seize his assets. Last January, the judge ruled. Murphy alleged operated a Ponzi scheme parallel to Petersky's investors' claim. Petersky was forced into bankruptcy in August 2022 after allegedly scamming hundreds of investors out of more than $40 million. I want my money, Sutherland said, sitting beside his legal counsel wearing a black leather jacket on Friday. Murphy surrendered his truck and Porsche, which are set to be liquidated within the next month. But the court heard that he refused to hand over his guns after insisting a firearms expert sent proof of his license prior to a meeting that was set to take place early this week. During the sentencing, the judge said the Murphy's behavior often amounted to giving the middle finger and snubbing his nose at the court. In the summer of 2021, Murphy pulled into Sutherland's Oshawa driveway in Porsche, he said in an interview with W5 premiering on February 3rd. Murphy was there to collect thousands in cash he claimed would be invested in cryptocurrency. When Sutherland first met Petersky, The so-called crypto king at a racetrack in southwestern Ontario with Murphy, he said the introduction left him even more impressed. Sutherland was told that his investment with Murphy ballooned to $878,000 at its height. He said he asked Murphy to take out his original investment of $120,000 and even reached out to Petersky directly, but the two pointed fingers at each other, saying the other lost his money. While Murphy has been sentenced to 5 months in jail, Petersky's bankruptcy proceedings are nearing the 20th month mark. A Clarington man is facing charges after he allegedly discharged a firearm through a wall into his neighbor's kitchen. Police were initially called to a townhouse near Charles Road and Strathallan Drive at around 6:40 p.m. on Thursday. The authorities say that the victim was seated at their kitchen table when they heard a loud noise and felt something strike their leg. The individual did not sustain any physical injuries, but police say a bullet was later located underneath the table and the bullet-sized hole was discovered in a wall nearby. A search was then conducted in the adjoining townhouse to check on the safety of residents. That is when officers found another bullet hole corresponding with the placement of the one in the kitchen next door, police say. Officers then searched the backyards of the residences and located a firearm in the backyard of the suspect's townhouse. The homeowner was located a short distance away and taken into custody without incident, police said in a news release. A suspect identified as Jamera Malone, 42, is facing 4 weapons-related charges in connection with the investigation. Toronto police are looking for 8 suspects who allegedly stole $300,000 worth of industrial copper cable from a downtown electrical station last month. Officers responded to a break-and-enter call on January 15 in the area of Lakeshore, Boulevard West and Reese Street, police said in a news release issued Friday. On January 13 and 14, police said the suspects gained entry into an electrical station in the area. According to police, 4 separate vehicles were used over 2 days to complete the alleged theft. Investigators believe roughly $300,000 worth of industrial-grade copper wire was stolen. All 8 suspects are wanted by police on charges of break-and-enter and theft over $5,000. Police released images of the vehicles and suspects on Friday in an effort to identify them. In one of the images, a number of the alleged suspects can be seen wearing construction vests and huddling behind one of the vehicles. Anyone with the information about the alleged theft is asked to contact police at 416-828-5200 or Crime Stoppers anonymously. The federal government is providing Toronto with another $143 million in funding to help support the influx of asylum claimants arriving in the city. The funding, which is through the Interim Housing Assistance Program (IHAP) program, is part of the $362 million that will be distributed across Canada and was announced by Federal Immigration Minister Mark Miller earlier this week. In July, the federal government promised to provide Toronto with $97 million to fund interim housing for asylum seekers. But in the months that followed, municipalities including Toronto repeatedly called on Ottawa for more cash to address the true cost of the crisis. Last month, the city's budget chief Shelley Carroll indicated that the city required another $250 million from the federal government to help cover the cost of housing asylum claimants in Toronto. The city threatened homeowners with an additional 6% levy on their tax bill in 2024 if the federal government didn't come through with more money. Miller's funding announcement came the night before Chow released her 2024 draft operating budget, which did not include the 6% levy. The new cash provided the city will reimburse Toronto for costs incurred in 2023 and the first quarter of 2024. Speaking at the news conference on Friday, Chow called the funding commitment a down payment and added that the federal government has committed to coming through with more money for the rest of 2024. When announcing the details of her proposed budget Thursday, Chow confirmed that the city is currently housing around 6,000 asylum seekers and refugees in its shelters. This number, she said, represents about half of the shelter population in Toronto. Freeland also announced Friday that Ottawa will provide a $19.75 million top up to the city's share of the Canada Ontario Housing Benefits, which offers financial support to low income renters. Chow said this money will give 2,000 people a chance to find decent, permanent homes. When pressed about previous tension between the two governments over the lack of adequate funding for asylum seekers, Freeland dismissed the idea that there was a strained relationship.
Thank you for tuning in. I'm Kubra Ali. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channel. Have a good night.